Welcome back to the Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources podcast, the replay series. I'm your host, Tracy Chernoff, and I'm thrilled to have you join us once again as we journey through the episodes that have topped charts around the world. In this podcast series, we're revisiting some of our most insightful, thought-provoking, and transformative conversations with industry experts, thought leaders, and practitioners. These episodes have made waves, sparking meaningful conversation and inspiring positive change throughout human resources. Whether you're a dedicated listener who's been with us from the start or you're just tuning in for the first time, the replay series offers a chance to dive deep into the core principles that guide our exploration into HR practices. So get ready to rediscover the discussions that continue to shape the future of HR. Without further ado, let's step back in time and immerse ourselves into the podcast's top charted episodes. Let the replay begin. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Thank you so much for being here for another week. I'm really glad that you have made it to part 2 of a 2-part episode. So if you have no idea what I'm talking about, it means that you missed part 1 of the episode and podcast swap that I did with the People Problems podcast. So you have a couple options here. You can go back to the People Problems podcast and listen to that first, which came out last week. And I was essentially a guest on their podcast for the first part of this episode, and they are on my podcast. And when I say they, I mean Alexa and Tyson of the People Problems podcast. And so the second part is happening in just a few moments when we roll into the second part on this episode. So it is a podcast swap. You can, in theory, listen to this episode first if you really want to, but why mess up the flow of things, right? The first part, again, is on the People Problems podcast, and the second part is right here. So if you have already listened to part 1, then you have no need to go anywhere else. You are in the right place, and we can kind of kick off part 2 in just a moment. So before I go into it, I just want to let you know that for the first time on my podcast, I am releasing an explicit episode. There are some curse words that fly around in this episode. And so if you have been here before and you've listened to my podcast, you know that I tend to filter myself a little bit on this area of life, probably for reasons that make me totally lame, but honestly, it's because if a future employer listens to my podcast, I don't want them to just think about or hear the curse words that come out of my mouth. And I have to tell you, I think I've mentioned it before, but outside of my podcast, I have a lot to say in the area of choice words, if you know what I mean. So if you listen with children or maybe, people with ears that are sensitive, you might just want to proceed with caution because there are some F-bombs, and we're not going to apologize for that today, but just so you know. Also, you have to make sure that you are following and listening to the People Problems podcast because it was such a pleasure to be on their show. And I'm just super glad that we were able to do this podcast swap so that Alexa and Tyson are on my show as well. And hopefully we can do this again in the future. But I have to say it was a lot of fun laughing about all of these HR misconceptions. You all know my very first episode was all about destigmatizing HR, and I feel like the month of August has been about all of the stigmas and the misconceptions that are associated with HR, so it kind of just feels like we're coming full circle as I approach the 2nd anniversary of my podcast. So without further ado, before jumping in, I just want to remind you, you can rate, review, and subscribe wherever you are catching this podcast, whether you're listening or watching on Spotify or YouTube. And I would love if you take time at the end of the episode to leave a 5-star review and a nice little comment. And if you could follow me on Instagram and TikTok at HR Tracy, and that is Tracy with an I. So with that said, we're going to go right into part 2. Thank you so much for sticking around and being here. Here we go.
All you do is fire people, pay people, and fire people.
I think my grandma submitted this. That's truly what she thinks I do.
Just fire people all day.
She's like, do you just fire people and then you hire new ones? I'm like, not exactly.
Sort of.
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah, so let's explain this to grandma. Explain maybe to grandma why that's not true.
Oh, well, the reality is for me is that this is a true misconception and also a false one. The true part of it is that we are so intertwined in the hiring and termination process, obviously termination for mitigating risk and hiring because someone's got to figure out what they're getting paid and maintain all of the, equity involved in that. Totally. Or maybe it's a recruiting team. The falseness in it is that terminations are often coming from a manager, right? So like, unless you're the person's manager, you're either supporting or you're just ensuring that, the termination is following all of the guidance that you recommend to ensure that there's equity and fairness and consistency across the organization. So I guess the misconception probably comes from the level of involvement that we so often have to have. But at the same time, it's like, I feel like it's not even 10% of what HR really does, unless you're in a recruitment role.
I think.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tyson.
Yeah. So recruiters, that's like all they do is hire people. Not to be ignorant or anything, but like that's kind of what they do.
That's why I'm not
and there's other stuff. Yeah, same. Like, and I've never been a recruiter, so I'm gonna get my recruiting friends calling me, being like, "You don't know what the fuck you're talking about."
Right.
But,
Good recruiters are incredible. Bad recruiters just throw a bunch of shit against a wall and see what sticks.
Bad recruiters are incredibly bad.
Yeah.
Really bad. So look, again, kind of piggybacking off what you're saying there, Tracy, is yes, we are involved with hiring and firing. Do we make the decisions on who's getting hired and who's getting fired? Not always. Do we have influence? Yes, we do. But that's not what we do all day, like, this isn't like some George Clooney shit where I just like sit there and, like, definitely not. There's a whole life cycle, and Alexa's gonna love my little employee life cycle. I'm sure that just makes you so happy. Exactly. It's the whole thing. It's before they start and the transition out. But there's a whole shitload of stuff in between, okay?
There is a lot.
There's a lot of things. I'm all about a good employee life cycle diagram. Don't worry, Tyson. I wish we could whiteboard.
We should put our faces.
We do this.
Yeah, we should make a little diagram with the faces that we made in the beginning, and just understanding the employee.
Yeah. That's so good. Yeah, I love this. HR face memes coming post podcast. We'll have to get the design team on that.
Get on that team.
Yeah, but so it's funny. I think what would be the misconception is that all HR does is fire people. Mm-hmm. The truth is that HR is involved when people are hired and when people are fired. So it's different. It's a difference of, and I realize that nuance is lost on stupid people, but just for the smart people that are listening, which is hopefully everyone,
all of our listeners,
we love you. You're very intelligent. Thanks for being here. Put up with this. The operative word here is like all you do. So you're present. That doesn't mean you do it. It doesn't mean you make the decision. You're there for these things. You're present. You're part of the process, but it is not your initiating of the process in most of these cases, right?
We're there to make it better.
Yeah.
Or and at least make it less bad.
Right. Less bad, and make sure it's consistent too. I feel like, honestly, I think that part of the misconception comes from, I always try and figure out where things originate. So this is, you'll probably hear me continue to try and root cause where something comes from. But,
I love it.
People who have had poor experiences, whether they were terminated, period, or they had a bad experience with their termination, it's, to me, it's probably that HR was not involved. And so they had a bad experience because their manager or leader didn't know what to do and didn't communicate effectively. Or two, that HR was involved and it just was not a conversation that the employee appreciated, because who wants to get terminated? And so now HR is lumped into this bucket of being a bad person.
Well, I'll also throw in a third possibility, because those are both wonderful possibilities. The third possibility is that there was just some really fucking bad HR involved, because that happens too. And that that is not all fucking rainbows and sunshine. Totally. Some people suck at this and they get it really wrong. And people extrapolate those individual people or those individual instances to the entire sort of function. And it's really detrimental to like how people can actually wind up utilizing the function for good. Like Tyson said, like, you're there to make it better or at least less bad. Like, if you can optimize that relationship, like, it's good for everybody involved.
Right.
But this idea of like, oh yeah, I got terminated in a really shitty way by one person once, or, I worked at this organization where, the HR people were dickheads. Like, now all of a sudden you just associate HR with those things because, sometimes there is too much bureaucracy and sometimes there there is too much admin, and sometimes the newsletter emails are really fucking terrible because the wrong person wrote them. But that's not the same as just starting with this carte blanche reputation of like, HR sucks. All they do is fire people. They don't care about me. Like, that's where all these things come from, is to your point. Like, people extrapolate these like individual fucked up situations, and they feel like nobody had their back. Right. Like, they're like, yeah, there was nobody there repping for me. And it's like,
but even in that situation, that individual cannot expect that all I do all day long is fire. Even if it was the worst termination meeting ever. Do they think if this is all I do all day long, don't you think I would have been better at it? Like, honestly, you like,
also, I'm sorry, if all you do is do that shit all day long, I think you'd be like a fucking psychopath. Like, if you're just sitting, it's like,
where would everybody be?
Getting off on firing people all day? Like,
you're out of here.
Don't go near Tyson. That's tapped.
That's bizarre. That's
just
bizarre.
You know what? Tyson with a Tommy gun all day, just taking.
You're out of here. You're fired. You're done with. Don't talk to me. Oh my God.
Annihilating people all day.
So
getting
true.
The Terminator, literally.
The Terminator, literally.
This is what sticks in people's minds, though, right? Like, when they're fired, you never forget that, I'm sure. I mean, I've never, knock on wood, I've never been fired. I'm very lucky, I guess, and grateful for that. But that's what people remember. And if you do it well, they're still going to remember it, but they might still hate you. But at least, hopefully, they'll remember that you had some consideration, you gave them information, and they felt at least, clear about what was going on. But I also think, thinking about all the HR people that are not so great and should just exit stage left as soon as possible to make room for the people that want to do a good job. I say this all the time on my podcast. I'm like, just get out of the role. What are you hogging the seat for? Get out. Yeah. But those, people speak, and every stereotype has a little bit of truth to it, right? Like, that's why there are misconceptions and why there is some truth to these misconceptions, because the bad stuff, the negative things, always spreads much faster than anything good. You could do a million good things for someone, and then one thing could go wrong. You make one mistake, you fire someone in a way that was like, maybe it was a bad day for you or whatever, and that sticks, and that's what spreads. And then you
we're
take
mean bitches.
Yeah, and then we're mean bitches. Exactly.
I think I know the title of this episode. Mean
HR.
Bitches.
Right.
I love it. All right. Well, speaking of which, the next misconception, just to keep the fodder going here, is that HR is easy and anyone can do it.
You know what? Get out of here. Don't even
swipe left on that shit.
Absolutely not.
Goodbye. If you think that, just don't even grace me with your presence.
Give these guys an example of some shit that you're like, you don't want to deal with this. Like, thank God you have me to do this for you. Other than hiring and firing people, because that's all you guys do.
Oh my gosh. Succession planning, like strategizing something that might not even happen in 5 years from now. I mean, like, I think about business planning, the succession planning with talent management. I think about like designing culture philosophies, things that can be very abstract, but also require you to think very pragmatically in the moment. I mean, and then adding on top of that, not having enough time to do it because there are things in the moment that require all of your time. If someone would like to show me that they can do it and it's easy, I absolutely would love to watch.
Just freaking managing
a little spicy on this topic.
I love it. I love the spicier the better, Tracy.
I feel like just managing people's feelings all day and like the politics and like working in that realm. So it's like, not only do we have to do our job, but we're like friggin' matrix, like dodging like office politics and like big egos and like trying to make people like herding cats to like make a decision in something, like, right? And it's difficult because a lot of the time the work that we're involved in like does come with high feelings. So like if we're talking about succession
high
planning,
feelings,
like, high
feelings are high.
Feelings are high.
I like when feelings are low.
High feelings.
High feelings. Mean bitches with high feelings.
This is like HR we always have this like lingo. It's like tension, friction points, high feelings.
I love it. High feelings is one of them. So
high feelings.
If we go back to Tracy's example and we're talking about succession planning, we've got manager A versus manager B. They each want a different person to be into the role, like how do we then deal with that, right? Like it's very difficult juggling a lot of that stuff, like reorging, workforce management, all that stuff comes with a lot of high feelings.
Yeah. Also, like when you have to unfortunately go through layoffs, like we just talked about this, right? With terminations, like that's not easy. I can think of all of the terminations that were so hard for me to be involved with because of, whatever, like whether we agreed with it or disagreed, or, it's just a sad situation. Maybe someone stole and it's like someone you really appreciated or whatever, right? Like it's hard and you have
or they didn't do anything wrong.
Or they didn't do anything wrong.
There's just no money and we have to that's the hardest. That's
hard. I agree. It is the hardest because you like, if you're a good HR partner, you're thinking about that person as an entire human being. And so now you know their family, you know what they have to like who they're going to speak to about this. And it just royally sucks. And also it's very manic. You have to jump between like someone crying and then like celebrating someone's promotion within 15 minutes. And like, how do you manage your own emotions through that? You have to almost like desensitize yourself, but also be completely emotionally open to people. And it's kind of certifiable. And the ER issues, like employee relations, for anyone out there, like no one wants to do that job. I used to love it. And anytime I said that, whether it was on an interview or with a colleague, they're like, that's great because I hate it. So if anyone's in an ER specific role, like that is so hard. So hard.
Yeah, we actually just by the time this comes out, we'll have had a guest who does ER, and she is a fucking saint. Like she is so even keeled, and like she is so just fucking like chill. Like you have the perfect temperament for this shit. Yeah, man, you deal with enough people, like you'll start to go crazy. And that's it. So what do you think, Tyson? It's easy. Anybody can do it.
No. I said my bit. It's hard. It's hard when you're dealing with the egos and everything.
Well, it's funny because one of the other misconceptions is actually there's quite a few that are similar, and I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole just in the interest of time, but other misconceptions like we just sit there and wait for emails to come in. We don't actually have work to do and are just waiting for someone to give us a task. We wait around to serve employees and need to make their wild ideas work. So similar in that, like, if you perceive that people are just sitting there twiddling their fucking thumbs all day, you might think anybody could do this, but that's not what HR does all day.
I am down for making wild ideas work. I think that's a fun misconception. Like if a manager's like, I have this like cool experiment or this like cool idea, like let's figure out how to make it work. I don't think that's the context.
That's not the context of this one is like, you bring me your crazy shit and think I'm supposed to make fucking shit, shit into Shinola. Exactly.
Thanks for this heaping pile of crap. Now let me make a gold bar.
Yeah. Fucking Fort
We can
Knox.
do that. We can do that.
We can. We're very creative. Yeah, we're problem solvers. We're creative. I love that we've taken misconceptions and we've just promoted ourselves.
We just made our resume.
Mean bitches with high feelings. Yo. Amazing. All right, so let's talk about one that I know is going to get Tyson fired up on. So I think it's probably a good one to sort of get your feelings on, Tracy, and sort of a good last one for this conversation, which is, and there's a couple that are kind of around this, but the first one is that HR is supposed to be popular, and then there's, just to follow on to give you guys some ammo here. Another one is that we are party planners and cheerleaders. And Tracy, no one who's listening can hear you make that face. And that, I'll leave it at that one. Then we'll end on a fun one, which is the other side of this comment. But what do we think? Like, people have this misconception that I actually don't think anyone has the conception that HR is supposed to be popular. I actually wish more people had that misconception. And I'm happy to wax poetic about that once Tyson spouts off. But something to be said about the party planners and cheerleaders thing for sure. I also understand where that comes from. But what do you guys think?
So look, like, I've like built a business off of cool HR, so I can't really like shit on it now. But here's the thing, like, it's not our job.
Yeah, the popular girl in HR is like, you're not supposed to be popular.
You're not. Like, look, like, it's not
Fucking hypocrite.
I don't show up to work. Like, I'm literally wearing my shirt.
I know. All right, wrap the shameless. Yeah,
sponsored by Cool.
Right. We need people problems swag. It's stat.
So, but look, like, I don't think that it's our job to be popular. I don't know why that was ever a thing to have to be popular. Like, do you have to like your finance person? Do you have to like your marketing person? Like, I don't think that there's really like, I think that in general, everybody should be respected for the work that they're doing. I don't think that I'm going to like be upset at night if someone's like, oh, like HR, like the HR team, like isn't popular. Like, what are we saying popular here? Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know. Like, I just don't think that needs to be our job. I think that managers should be the ones worrying about being popular and just leave HR alone.
You know, leave HR. It's like leave Brittany alone. Leave HR alone.
Leave HR alone.
Blink twice if you're okay.
Yeah, right. Go on mute if you need us to come save you. You know, I have two schools of thought here. First is that I've always learned or have been told that if everyone likes you, you're doing something wrong because you're not making you're not opinionated enough. You're not making waves enough. Like you're not, and not everyone is going to like you if you are staying true to yourself, because that is just the way life works. The second school of thought for me is that I really feel like everyone takes this like company versus employee perspective that Tyson, that you brought up before. Yeah. And puts HR outside of both. And so HR is separate from companies and employees. But the reality is that HR people are employees of the company, and we are fulfilling requirements and doing, job responsibilities, just like someone in finance or marketing or retail or whatever. And so for us to be, put into this like pigeonhole that we have to either be super likable or we're two-faced is really just exacerbating the problem. Like there are going to be likable people that we work with, whether they're in HR or finance, and there are going to be people that maybe we don't like. But again, Tyson, I think you brought up a great point that everyone deserves to have respect with and within what they do. And it also brings up that last misconception about like the job being easy. No job is easy. No job is, irreplaceable. No, like every job has its pros and cons and difficulties. And, I think even thinking about this party planner piece, I recently saw probably on Reels or somewhere on Instagram, where someone was like, your female HR leaders are not your cheerleaders and party planners. And it made me think about this concept in that frame of reference. Like, is this a misogynistic systemic issue where women are in HR and women have to party plan and women are event planners, like in that role? And it could be a symptom of that, because there are definitely male and non-binary HR people, and they deserve to have just the same respect as anyone else. And I don't know. I think this is where breaking down the stigmas across the board will allow people to see us as human beings and not just this function that has to operate in a robotic way that just does things or doesn't do things or does things the way that people want them to. Like, we're treated almost like a function rather than people within a job function.
I think, and so just quickly, like on that point, like if we're looking at it, so I can say that from the perspective, like, oh, like I don't really care about being cool because like, as an HR business partner, I'm very integrated into my business. But now if I'm thinking about it from another perspective, if you are an HR person that's continually excluded because you work in HR and you're not invited to the parties, you're not brought in because like, they're like, oh, like you're HR, so you're going to be like here policing us and enforcing the policies. From that respect, I do think that HR should be popular, to be brought in, like it, so to speak, like to be included, in and included and really integrated into the rest of the company. I don't think that they should be isolated and excluded.
Mm-hmm. I'm making small inroads with her, Tracy. I'm getting there slowly. No, look, I don't agree. I disagree. Jesus Christ, so tired. I disagree. I know I agree with everything you guys are saying, but I would frame it slightly differently, which is, Tracy, you make an incredible point, which is sometimes you are treated just like a function. But to be fair, HR is a business function. Like, and people will make this when I make my, like, we got to rebrand HR and HR should be the cool kids argument to be a little bit provocative for this exact reason. People say, well, I'm just a function. Like, who cares if you like marketing or who cares if you like sales and all these things? And the answer is like, none of those functions in the business have this reputational problem, right? No one, those groups are not being excluded. Those groups are not thought of as potentially the police or potentially the people that like can't be anywhere near the party or it won't be any fucking fun, right?
Like accountant friends,
maybe accounting.
Yeah, I would say
I don't know.
Team.
You know what?
I don't think the accountants are known as like the life of the party, but like they're definitely not going to be excluded, right? Like they're not going to be like hush hush the accountants here.
It's true. I mean, we live in that nuanced place because of the nuance of our role. But exactly. This, you know what? This all comes back to the point for me, which is like bringing the human back to human resources. Like we have to see people within the organization, just like in removing HR from the equation. When we look at people, so often the higher you get within an organization, you're just looking at numbers. You're looking at a percentage of attrition. You're looking at a percentage of an organization. You're looking at human beings boiled down to digits. And it's kind of the same as what happens with HR, where it's like, oh, HR stinks because the function might be broken, but it doesn't necessarily mean the people are. So to me, it's like, this is where systemically we have to fix that all around.
So I think it's both. So to finish what I was, so you're perfectly making my point for me, Tracy, which is on one hand, it is a function, right? And the function needs to be healthy. It needs to be effective. It needs to be clearly understood what the fuck its job is and how it adds value to the organization. To be respected and effective and all these things. And then it also has to be people that do the function that can carry out the effectiveness of the function itself, but also be human while doing it. And so, for example, I actually think you want your HR team, not every person on your HR team, specifically not every woman on your HR team, doing shit like party planning and all these things, but you probably want your people team handling that shit because it is like the most high touch experience your employees are going to get. It's a way to make the function highly visible and say to your employees, hey, the HR team is here on like to be a liaison, to do cool shit. We're part of a positive conversation. And the people in that function, I think, because, and this is my major caveat here, I know Tyson's going to smirk at me, but because the stigma is so bad and the reputation is still so stale, the only way I think to fix the stigma of the people that do it is to make them fucking like hot girl rock stars that are just like the coolest fucking kids in the room. And then you go, okay, I think of HR a little differently now. I understand the business function. I also understand, just like the rock star sales guy, not just the hot chick part, but
that would be like you saying to me, Tyson, you're introverted and you're quiet. You should go like do a little dance on the table.
No, I'm not talking about an individual person. No. I don't misunderstand me here. I'm not talking about an individual person. I'm not talking. There are plenty of people and there's actually one of these is on the list. There's plenty of people in HR that are introverted. I think there's also a major misconception about what the fucking introvert and extrovert even are, but that's a different conversation. I think if you can create iconoclasts of people that you say, this is what like rock star people look like, that really get the function, that are out in the world, like making the case for the higher function, that are sort of a new breed of like person to look at, which I would argue we are doing with conversations like this and people like the two of you and all of this, the whole HR influencer movement.
Planning is in that though.
But I just think that's a very high touch function.
Okay,
so like, this is how I see it. HR shows up to the party. We don't plan the party, to be clear. So again, bringing HR in with the business. So like bringing HR in to have exposure. The problem is that HR people, they're off on their own, like little hermits, not engaging with the business, not participating in like the fun stuff that the business does together. They come in, they fire people and they go, and then they do all the back end work, and they're not visible, right? So I think that as a function, yes, 1,000% I agree. We have to be visible. We have to sell ourselves, be very clear what we're about, how we're involved in decisions. I don't think that party planning is included in like making us more visible.
Well, I think we need a whole separate conversation about party planning, because as a professional event planner, I have lots of thoughts about this. And there's difference between like who books the caterer and like designing the experience of the event for a group of people or an offsite or something like that. So that's my only point. But go ahead,
I'm going to caveat the caveat, and I'm going to see both sides here in my true HR fashion. Okay. The first caveat to the caveat that I'd like to say is that there is so much value in getting people outside of the HR function who are really excited about employee engagement to be involved in that experience. So while I do agree that the high touch parts of an organization should be owned by HR in that way, I think there has to be mutual ownership from other people within the organization.
1,000%.
Like in my role right now, I'm a director of employee engagement. So I am truly seeing both sides here, because did I ever see myself planning certain things? No, but actually I get so much satisfaction out of seeing our engagement increase by creating an experience within each moment. So we have a happy half hour each week. And if I can make that 30 minutes amazing for people who are having maybe a difficult week, a busy week, maybe they're new, that's one of the best ways that I can drive engagement. And the other thing to that is that I'm not doing it alone. I don't have to be there every week. I choose to be, but there are other people who are helping lead that charge. So like the same thing where if you have a resource group or a committee, like we have a fun committee, and while I lead it, there are members of each department on that fun committee, because I think, Tyson, actually, you might have mentioned this on a previous episode of yours, that everyone owns the culture. And I think it was in this like people ops versus HR title. I think that's where it came from, but everyone owns the culture. And so if you can get everyone involved in that party planning, which I think we're not necessarily party planning, but we are certainly influencing the party at an organization.
Yes.
But right, we can see party
Tracy's just
influencers.
influencing all the things.
I'm rebranding it all. But like that's, if you can get everyone involved, then you're creating an even better experience for them and for everyone.
Yeah, I can absolutely get on board with that, being sort of like providing support and like guidance with the business.
Yeah, you don't have to blow up the fucking balloons.
Yeah, I'm not going to be doing that. Not my strength.
Let's determine like, okay, like what is the issue happening in the team, and like how can we like create something that's going to solve X.
And most importantly, to Tracy's point, I think the really important piece of this is then that feedback that's coming from this got people really engaged, or this got people really doing something, or this fucking flopped and like this didn't land on our team, is all housed in the same group that's talking about how this stuff plays into bigger business implications as you change things in a, for a segment or a, whatever. So I actually think it's something that should be pretty close to the vest.
We do this a lot with like, once you get your engagement survey back, like you're sitting with the managers and you're like, hey, like we have this issue and that issue, like as an HR person, like these are some of my suggestions of what I've seen, like that can like be helpful in those situations. But again, like they're owning it and executing it. So it's more about providing like the guidance and support versus, like you said, blowing up the balloon.
Did you fill out your survey yet? Hey, did you fill out your survey yet? Do you have your survey yet? Can you fill out that survey? Hey, did you get that survey yet? It would be really helpful if you just filled out that survey real quick for me.
How much do I need to pay you to fill out the survey?
Exactly. Right. How much? Yeah. $10 Amazon gift card? Free lunch? Free lunch if you do it by
at that
Friday.
point, I'm driving the price up. Yeah,
that happens though.
All right. This leads me to my very last misconception for this fantastic episode, wherever you are listening to it. And that is the misconception that HR people have no fun and are not allowed to like laugh and have no sense of humor. And I think we can all just call it gigantic bullshit on that one.
What do you think we're doing?
Yeah.
Hello.
Right? This is fun for most of us.
Party, okay?
Who has this much fun talking about all of the shit that people talk about us? Like, we're having so much fun laughing at people's misconceptions of us.
It's amazing.
Do other people have like so Tracy, like you and I are like, we're like kindred spirits. Like I too am like HR by day, HR by night. Like I don't turn it off, right? Like it's my day job, but I also like try to like.
One of the misconceptions on here is that HR is who you are, not what you do.
No, I mean, I agree.
That we are the job. HR is not. You're both like, no, I am HR always.
But, if we weren't having fun, like we, I don't know other
sick,
maybe
twisted, mean bitches with high feelings.
Right. Gotta love the high feelings. I live in my high feelings.
There's something slightly twisted about this, though. Like, you gotta admit, there's something. This is why I think we can have so much fun with it. Is it's slightly twisted? But people are fucking crazy.
But like, don't people always say, like, if you don't wake up looking forward to what you do, like, you have to change what you're doing. So it's not like you're not always going to love where you work or the work that you're doing. But if you love like the intention behind what you're doing and like overall 80% of what you do, then you're doing the right thing. And I think it's the people in HR who don't wake up like obsessed with it that need to exit the room and find a different job. Because if you're not passionate about what we do, whether it's like whether you're in a payroll function or a generalist business partner, it doesn't matter. If you're not passionate about all elements there, like supporting the company, supporting the people, challenging the status quo, problem solving, everything in between, the employee life cycle, then like why are you doing this job? You know, it's a thankless job. Why are you here?
Yeah, nobody does it for the glory, man.
And it's hard because we are fighting against all of these misconceptions, right? Like, it's not like now I'm thinking about the accountant.
5% of the list, man.
Yeah, like think about the accountant that just gets to wake up and go and do his job and doesn't have to prove himself or herself to anybody, right? I feel like in HR, like here we are. I know, right? Like he doesn't have to have a podcast showing how cool he is, right? Or she is. But here we are.
Or they are.
Right, working double time.
Yep. Yeah, we're working double time here trying to.
We're in fucking sweatshirts that say it.
Right, Cool HR, sponsored by Cool HR.
No. God damn it. Oh, I love
free
it.
Advertising.
I love you guys. All right. This has been so fun. Listen to us on all the places you can get podcasts. You can get people problems. You can get bringing the human back to human resources on Apple, Spotify, all the things. Thank you for listening. If you made it this far to both parts of this episode, Tracy, thanks for doing this with us. And we gotta get the ladies together more often, I think.
Oh, seriously, we need to do this again. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Likewise.
And thanks for having us.
Yeah, yes. Seriously.
You're welcome anytime. Hey, just before you go, don't forget to subscribe to this show so that you are the first to hear when an episode drops each week. And maybe leave a 5-star review and a comment about how much you loved this episode. Plus, if you have someone in mind who would really enjoy this episode, make sure you share it with them. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.